The night had fallen heavy over the city, rain drumming against the tall glass towers that sparkled with artificial light, and in the midst of that storm sat Eleanor Hayes, a woman known to the world as a ruthless billionaire CEO who never bowed her head to anyone. But tonight she was trembling like a lost child, clutching her own arms for comfort as she whispered into the emptiness of the subway station, "Please, don't leave me here alone." Her voice cracked with a desperation she had never allowed anyone to hear, not even her closest board members or the powerful men she negotiated with daily. And in that moment she wasn't the feared Iron Lady of finance, but a fragile human being left vulnerable by circumstance, because just hours ago her empire had collapsed under betrayal from her own executives and she had been cornered by the paparazzi, chased until she had no choice but to duck into the grim, graffiti-stained tunnels of the underground, her pristine white suit clinging to her with dampness, her golden heels now uncomfortable burdens, and she felt utterly abandoned by the world she thought she owned. From the shadows emerged a man she had never seen before, tall, rugged, with eyes that carried both weariness and strength, dressed not in the polished armor of corporate power but in the simple worn jacket of someone who worked hard every day just to make ends meet, and beside him clung a small child, no older than 6, her innocent eyes wide as she clutched a stuffed toy that had clearly been mended many times. This man was Daniel Reed, a single father who had lost his wife years ago and since then had dedicated his life entirely to raising his little girl, working multiple jobs to survive, and fate had led him to this very platform at the exact moment when Eleanor's cry for help echoed through the cold tunnels. He looked at her, not with the admiration or intimidation most people offered her, but with a calm concern, the way a man who had known hardship all his life might look at another soul lost in the storm, and as Eleanor's knees gave way beneath her, Daniel instinctively stepped forward, placing himself between her trembling figure and the dark emptiness that threatened to swallow her, and his little girl tugged at his sleeve whispering, "Daddy, is she okay?" Eleanor looked up at him, tears streaking her face, her lips trembling as she begged again, "Don't leave me here, please. I have no one," and for the first time in her life she admitted the truth. Her empire meant nothing without people, without love, without someone willing to stand by her when the lights went out. Daniel knelt beside her, his rough calloused hand resting gently on her shoulder, and he spoke with the steady voice of a man who had carried his own burdens for too long. "You're not alone, not tonight," and though he had no riches, no power, his words wrapped around her like the warmth of a blanket in the cold, bringing her a fragile sense of safety. The subway hummed. As a train rumbled far in the distance, the sound reverberating like a heartbeat, and in that silence Eleanor realized she had crossed paths with someone who would change her life forever, not through contracts or wealth, but through the rare gift of humanity. Daniel's daughter, curious and sweet, offered Eleanor her stuffed toy with shy hands, and the sight of that gesture cracked open something inside the CEO's heart, a heart that had been locked behind walls of steel and ambition for decades, and she sobbed openly, clutching the toy like a lifeline. Daniel helped her to her feet, steadying her as if she were as precious as glass, and together they walked out of the station into the pouring rain, a billionaire woman and a poor single father bound not by circumstances of wealth but by a bond that had sparked in the lowest, darkest place. Over the next days, Eleanor's life began to intertwine with Daniel's in ways she never expected, as she found herself drawn to the warmth of his small home, filled with love though lacking in luxury, where the scent of homemade soup and the laughter of a child replaced the sterile silence of her penthouse. She offered him opportunities, insisting she could repay his kindness with money and power, but Daniel always shook his head, telling her that all he wanted was to raise his daughter with dignity, and slowly, Eleanor began to understand that perhaps the greatest wealth she could ever earn wasn't written in numbers or stock markets, but in the fragile, unbreakable bond of family. Yet the world wasn't ready to accept a CEO humbled by love, and whispers spread, tabloids screamed, her board demanded explanations, but Eleanor stood firm, shielding Daniel and his daughter from the storm of media and scandal, and for the first time she fought not for profit but for people. The more she was torn down in the public eye, the more Daniel held her up in private, reminding her with his quiet strength that no matter how cold the world became, they had each other, and that truth was stronger than anything else. As the story of their unlikely connection spread across the city, some mocked, some envied, but many were moved, because in the end what people crave most isn't power or wealth, but the reassurance that in the darkest moments someone will step forward and whisper, "You're not alone." And so Eleanor Hayes, once the Iron CEO, rebuilt her life not with skyscrapers or fortune, but with the laughter of a child, the steady presence of a man who had nothing yet gave everything, and the newfound courage to live not as an untouchable leader but as a woman unafraid to love and be loved. Their story became a living proof that fate can bring together the most unlikely souls in the most unexpected places, and that kindness is the one treasure worth more than all the riches in the world. And to you, dear listener, if this story has touched your heart, if it has reminded you that even in your darkest tunnels someone out there may step forward to walk beside you, then don't let this be the end. Subscribe to this channel, join us for more stories that inspire, and never forget, you are never truly alone, not as long as there are hearts in the world brave enough to care.